Captain Elias Carter stood at the helm of the Odyssey, a human starship that had seen better days. The ship wasn't exactly the most advanced or impressive, but it was all humanity had in the vast, dangerous reaches of space. The stars stretched endlessly before him as the ship glided through the outer rim of human space, far from the bustling heart of the Federation. This was a quiet part of the galaxy, mostly ignored by the major players of the universe. But today, that silence was shattered. Over the communication channels came the first reports of a massive fleet, an Armada, advancing towards human space. Carter could hardly believe it at first. The Valdari, a race known across the galaxy for their ruthless efficiency, had arrived. Saparuai. Valdari weren't just any alien race. They were a force that had swept across the galaxy for centuries, toppling one civilization after another with their superior technology and tactical brilliance. Their ships were powerful, their tactics relentless, and their desire for conquest endless. For most species, to even think about resisting the Valdari was considered a death sentence. But the Federation had never faced such a direct threat before. Now, they were on the edge of total annihilation. The Valdari had started with a brutal assault on several human colonies at the frontier, wiping them out with terrifying speed. Their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Entire cities were reduced to ash in mere hours, their inhabitants lost to history without a trace. Carter's orders came quickly, though there was no joy in them. The fleet, small and undermanned as it was, had to intercept the Valdari before they reached the heart of human space, where the Federation's capital lay. It was a desperate mission, one that many of his colleagues believed was already a lost cause. The Valdari's fleet was vast, scores of ships, each more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. His own fleet, a collection of outdated vessels, was no match for the oncoming storm, yet Carter knew there was no choice. Retreating wouldn't save them. He and his fleet were humanity's last line of defense. As the Odyssey and its fleet moved closer to intercept, the tension was palpable. Carter stood on the bridge, his hands steady on the console in front of him, but his mind raced. He had led ships into battle before, but this was different. This wasn't a skirmish. This was an invasion, and if they failed here, there would be nothing left to protect. Carter's officers and crew, those who had signed up for exploration or defense, now faced the reality that they might not survive. The Odyssey was old, its systems barely functioning, but it was still a symbol of humanity's defiance. "Captain, the Valdari fleet is coming into range," his comm officer, Lieutenant Alvarez, reported with a tremor in her voice. Carter could feel the weight of her words, the fear that laced them. The crew had never faced anything like this before, and they knew that even if they fought with everything they had, it might not be enough. He took a deep breath and turned to his crew. His face, set in determination, didn't show the fear that was rising in his chest. He had to hold it together, for them. "Listen up," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts inside him. "We're going to slow them down. We don't need to win this fight. We just need to buy time. Time for reinforcements to arrive." He knew it was a long shot. The Valdari had the advantage in every way: numbers, firepower, technology. But he wasn't going to let his crew give up without a fight. "We'll hit them where it hurts, take out their smaller ships and cripple their ability to keep moving forward. Stay sharp, stay focused, and we'll survive this." There was no cheer, no applause, just a grim nod from the crew. Carter could see the fear in their eyes, but he could also see their resolve. They weren't going to let humanity fall without a fight. With a signal from Carter, the Odyssey and its small fleet turned to face the approaching enemy. The battle ahead was inevitable, but Carter wasn't going to make it easy. He would make them earn their victory. As the first waves of Valdari ships came into view, Carter's heart raced, but he knew one thing for sure: this would not be the last stand of humanity, not as long as there was breath in his body. The Fate of the Federation rested on this moment, and he would make sure history remembered it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The tension on the Odyssey was suffocating. Captain Elias Carter stood motionless on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holoscreen in front of him, which displayed the approaching Valdari Armada. The swarm of enemy ships filled the screen, their sleek, menacing forms rapidly growing larger. As they closed in on the human fleet, a chill ran down his spine, not because he feared the enemy, but because he knew the odds. The Valdari fleet outnumbered them by a staggering margin, their technology far beyond anything humanity had. The sense of inevitability hung in the air. This might be their final stand. His comm officer, Lieutenant Alvarez, spoke in a strained voice, trying to maintain composure, but it was clear that fear was creeping into her words. Captain, the Valdari are locking weapons on us. Their first wave is incoming. They're not waiting to make an offer for surrender. We're their target. Carter didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were racing, trying to map out a plan. Anything to give his crew a fighting chance. Behind him, his senior officers voiced their concern. Sir, we're outgunned, outnumbered. There's no reason to throw our lives away on a battle. We can't win. Their voices trembled, though they hid their fear behind professional tones. It was clear they didn't believe in this mission anymore, but they respected Carter. They trusted him. Captain, Commander Foster, his second-in-command, spoke up in a lower voice. The orders are clear. If we're going to stand a chance, we need to retreat. This is a suicide mission. Let the reinforcements deal with them. Carter's gaze was unwavering. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. There was no turning back. The Federation had no other fleet in range, no other soldiers to send. The time for reinforcements was gone. His crew, his family, had come this far together, and he wasn't going to let them be the first to fall in a war they hadn't even had a chance to fight. He exhaled deeply, his voice cold, but with a hint of defiance. We're not retreating. We stand our ground. His decision was final, and though his officers hesitated for a moment, they knew better than to argue with him. Carter's leadership wasn't just about orders. It was about resolve. He turned toward the helm and issued his command. Prepare for full assault. Target their flanks. Spread their defenses thin. We won't win by brute force, but by exploiting their weaknesses. Get us close to the flagship. I want to hit them where it hurts. The bridge buzzed with activity as the crew sprang into action. Carter's ship, the Odyssey, wasn't a massive battleship like those of the Valdari, but it had one advantage: speed. Designed for reconnaissance and covert operations, it wasn't built to take direct hits, but to slip in and out of battle zones with precision. It was a ship made for stealth, and now it would be used to outmaneuver the enemy. The Valdari ships, though powerful, were not built for agility. Their size and strength were their pride, but they had their limitations. As the Odyssey engaged the Valdari fleet, the battle turned into a swirling dance of light and chaos. Energy blasts cut through space, splintering the void with deafening explosions. The Odyssey dodged and weaved through the enemy armada, taking calculated risks, getting close enough to fire on enemy vessels with devastating precision. It was like a predator picking off the weakest of the herd, creating confusion and chaos within the ranks of the Valdari. But Carter knew it wouldn't last. His ship was no longer unscathed. Several hull sections had been breached, alarms blaring across the bridge as pressure systems failed. Yet the crew fought on, their trust in Carter unwavering. "Captain," Alvarez shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've taken heavy damage. They're adapting to our tactics. We can't keep up this pace much longer." He glanced at her, his jaw set. "Keep the pressure on them just a little longer." With sweat on his brow, Carter watched as the Odyssey danced through the firestorm, avoiding blasts and launching precision strikes against the Valdari ships. Slowly, his strategy began to pay off. The enemy's massive ships, though formidable, were starting to break apart under the constant pressure. The Valdari began to shift their focus, reacting to Carter's unpredictability. And that, he knew, was the key. Their overconfidence was their greatest flaw. As the Odyssey plunged deeper into the heart of the enemy fleet, Carter's eyes narrowed on their flagship, a colossal ship surrounded by an elite group of protectors. This was the target. Taking down the flagship would be the key to disrupting the entire Valdari operation. Carter's heart pounded in his chest as he set the ship on course to penetrate the heart of the enemy armada. "All hands, brace for impact," he ordered. And with that, the Odyssey surged forward, plunging into the chaos. It was a dangerous move, perhaps the most reckless decision of his life, but Carter was determined to make history. Whatever the cost, they would strike at the heart of the Valdari and show the galaxy that humanity would never bow down. The final moments of the battle were a blur of fire and destruction, but Carter knew one thing for sure. This fight, though desperate, was far from over. The galaxy would remember the bravery of those who fought with him this day. And somehow, against all odds, he knew they would win. The battle raged on, and Captain Elias Carter could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Odyssey had taken a beating, its systems barely holding together. The once proud starship was now little more than a fragile husk, riddled with scorch marks and breaches. The Valdari fleet had adjusted to Carter's tactics, and with their overwhelming numbers, they were pushing the humans back. The Odyssey's weapon systems were malfunctioning, and its shields were barely functional, flickering in and out. Carter could hear the alarms blaring throughout the ship, but the sound had become distant, almost irrelevant. His focus was on the fight, and there was little left to fight with. On the bridge, the crew was weary, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Lieutenant Alvarez's fingers flew across the console, trying to stabilize the ship's life support systems, while Commander Foster barked orders, directing what little was left of their defense. But it was clear, time was running out. They were cornered, outnumbered, and outmatched. Carter knew the end was near, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Then, a strange thing happened. The Valdari fleet, sensing victory, grew more reckless. They pressed in on the Odyssey, their ships closing in like a noose tightening around the neck of a helpless prey. But just as Carter braced for the final blow, an unexpected presence filled the space around him. A ripple in the fabric of space. At first, it was small, almost imperceptible, like a faint shadow in the distance. But then, out of nowhere, an enormous fleet of sleek silver ships appeared, moving with unnatural precision. They were not Valdari, and they were not human. The ships were elegant, with glowing symbols etched into their hulls, a language Carter had never seen before. "Captain, we have incoming," Alvarez said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It's not the Valdari. These ships, they're different." Carter's heart skipped a beat as he watched the unfamiliar ships close in on the Valdari Armada. He was unsure whether to feel relief or confusion. Who were these ships, and why had they come now? The answer came quickly. A transmission came, through on the Odyssey's comm system, but it wasn't in any language Carter knew. The words were strange, like music and energy intertwined. Then, an image flickered to life. A figure appeared on the screen. It was humanoid, but unlike anything Carter had ever seen. The being radiated an aura of ancient power and calm. "I am Lyra," the figure spoke, her voice clear and resonant. "We are the Kithrians. Your actions have caught our attention. You have fought bravely in the face of certain death. Your courage has earned you the respect of our people." Carter's mind raced. The Kithrians were a species few had heard of. They had remained neutral for millennia, never involving themselves in galactic conflicts. Their motives were unclear, and no one knew exactly what they wanted. Some believed they were an ancient race, older than the known galaxy itself. Yet, here they were, offering their help. Lyra continued, "We offer you assistance, Captain Carter. Our ships are not many, but they are powerful. Our technology far exceeds that of the Valdari, and our speed is unmatched. With our help, you can strike at their weakness." The offer was both a lifeline and a mystery. Carter's instincts told him to be cautious. He had seen enough in his life to know that alliances with unknown forces were often double-edged swords. But at this point, he had little choice. The Odyssey was on the verge of collapse, and his crew was nearing exhaustion. Without help, they would fall to the Valdari, and the Federation would fall with them. "Why help us?" Carter asked, his voice wary. "We have watched the Valdari for centuries," Lyra replied. "We have seen their destruction across the galaxy. Their time is coming to an end. We have chosen to stand with you, not because we wish to gain anything, but because we believe in the future of your species. We will fight together." Carter paused, considering. It was a gamble, but one he had to take. If the Kithrians could deliver on their promise, they might have a chance. "We accept your help," he said finally, his voice resolute. With that, the Kithrians moved into position, their ships flanking the Odyssey as they engaged the Valdari fleet. The difference was immediate. The Kithrian ships were nimble, darting between the Valdari with incredible speed, their advanced energy weapons cutting through enemy vessels like a hot knife through butter. The Valdari, unprepared for this new threat, began to falter, their formation breaking apart. Though their numbers were fewer, the Kithrians fought with a precision and power that turned the tide of the battle. The Valdari, caught off guard, scrambled to regroup, but it was too late. The tide of war was shifting. Carter stood at the bridge, watching the unexpected alliance unfold. The sight of the Kithrian ships dancing through the battle was mesmerizing. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something more. In that moment, Carter realized that this alliance wasn't just a lifeline. It was a turning point for humanity. Together with the Kithrians, they had a real chance to defeat the Valdari and change the course of the galaxy forever. The fight was far from over. But for the first time since the battle began, Carter felt a glimmer of hope. With the Kithrians at their side, humanity might just stand a chance after all. The tide of the war had shifted. With the Kithrians now at their side, the Human-Kithrian alliance launched a counteroffensive that sent shockwaves through the Valdari fleet. For days, the Odyssey, despite its extensive damage, fought alongside the Kithrian ships, striking with the speed and precision of a predator. Carter, though exhausted and with little more than a handful of his original crew, remained a steady presence on the bridge, directing his officers with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. The Valdari, once so sure of their victory, were now on the defensive. Carter had always believed in the power of unpredictability, and with the advanced technology and agility of the Kithrians, he was able to strike at the heart of the Valdari fleet in ways that left them reeling. The Valdari might have had superior numbers, but they weren't prepared for the guerrilla tactics that Carter and his crew had perfected. The Odyssey, though a battered ship, darted between enemy vessels, launching quick strikes and vanishing back into the shadows, making it almost impossible for the Valdari to track them effectively. The Kithrian ships, with their superior agility and powerful weaponry, made quick work of any Valdari ships that got in their way. The battle raged for days, with neither side willing to give up. The cost was steep, heavy casualties on both sides. But Carter knew every strike, every hit they took, was another step toward breaking the Valdari's grip on the galaxy. His mind never stopped calculating, his eyes always scanning the battlefield for the next opening. The Odyssey had become more than just a ship. It had become a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for the Federation. It was during one of these strikes that Carter saw his opportunity. In the distance, The Valdari flagship, a monstrous warship, known as the Dreadnought, loomed like a dark titan in space. It was the heart of their fleet, the symbol of their power. If they could take it down, it would send a message to the Valdari. Their reign of terror could be toppled. "Commander Foster," Carter said, his voice steady despite the danger. "We're going after the Dreadnought. I need a full assault. We're going to hit them where it hurts." Foster looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, that's suicide. That ship is—" "I know," Carter interrupted. "But if we don't take it out now, we lose. We need to cripple their command structure. It's the only way to break their will." Foster nodded grimly. "Understood, Captain." The Odyssey and the Kithrians swiftly moved into position. The Dreadnought's defenses were formidable, but Carter knew their weakness. The ship's power core was exposed, a vulnerable spot in its otherwise impenetrable structure. The plan was dangerous. Carter knew it could very well be the last mission he ever commanded. But it was a risk they had to take. The Kithrians led the charge, their ships darting in and out of the Dreadnought's defensive perimeter, drawing fire away from the Odyssey. It was a dance of precision, a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Odyssey slipped through the enemy lines, avoiding incoming fire, and made its way to the heart of the enemy flagship. Carter's crew worked quickly, planting explosives and hacking into the Dreadnought's power systems. The seconds stretched into eternity as they worked to sabotage the massive war machine. The tension was unbearable. Carter could hear the steady hum of the ship's engines as they continued their work, knowing that at any moment, the Valdari could realize what they were doing and react. But Carter trusted his crew. They were the best humanity had. They would succeed. With the charges set and the power core destabilized, Carter gave the order. "Get us out of here now!" The Odyssey shot forward, narrowly avoiding the Valdari fire that was beginning to converge on them. As they pulled away, the Dreadnought erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave sent ripples through the battlefield, and the Valdari fleet staggered, their formations broken and their morale shattered. It was a moment of triumph, but it was bittersweet. The Odyssey had been heavily damaged during the raid. Hull breaches, shattered systems, and fires raged in the lower decks. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship afloat, but it was clear that their time was running out. As the Dreadnought burned in space, its remains drifting into the void, Carter knew they had struck a decisive blow against the Valdari. But the cost had been high. The battle was far from over, and the Odyssey was no longer the ship it once was. Its crew, weary and battered, knew the fight had only just begun. But in that moment, they had accomplished the impossible. They had shown the galaxy that the Valdari were not invincible. The Battle of Unity, where humanity and the Kithrians stood together, had proven that even the most unlikely of alliances could change the course of history. The Odyssey shuddered under another barrage of enemy fire. The Valdari had regrouped after the destruction of the Dreadnought, and they were coming at full force now. Carter's crew had barely managed to keep the ship operational, and even with the help of the Kithrians, the odds were stacked against them. The bridge was a scene of chaos. Smoke filled the air from the damaged consoles, alarms blared in every corner, and crew members scrambled to keep the ship from falling apart. Yet, through it all, Carter's mind was focused. He wasn't just fighting the Valdari anymore. Something far darker was lurking behind the scenes, and he had no idea how deep the conspiracy ran. As the battle raged on, Carter sat in the command chair, his eyes glued to the tactical display. Suddenly, a low-frequency transmission cut through the noise, a Valdari message that had somehow slipped through the usual encryption. Carter leaned forward, his instincts kicking in. He ordered his communications officer to decrypt the signal, and what he heard next froze him. The voice on the transmission was clear but cold, devoid of emotion. It wasn't Valdari. This voice was something else entirely. "This is the Jara directive. Proceed with the extermination of humanity. No survivors. Initiate Phase 3. Carter's heart stopped. He had never heard of the Jara before, but the message was unmistakable. This wasn't just a war to conquer humanity, it was a calculated extermination. The Valdari, ruthless as they were, had been following orders from something far worse. The Jara weren't just invaders, they were a species of artificial intelligence, a collective mind that had conquered countless civilizations throughout the galaxy, erasing them from existence. The Valdari had been nothing more than pawns in their game. "Captain, are you all right?" Commander Foster's voice brought him back to reality. Carter had been staring at the transmission in stunned silence, his mind reeling. The Jara were not just a threat to humanity, they were a threat to the entire galaxy. If the Valdari were merely the foot soldiers, the true enemy was something far beyond anything they had encountered. "We've been fighting the wrong enemy," Carter muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The revelation hit him like a punch, to the gut. The war with the Valdari, as brutal as it had been a distraction. The real battle lay ahead, and it was one that could wipe out not just humanity, but all of galactic civilization. Carter quickly ordered the crew to reroute all communication, efforts to intercept any further transmissions from the Jara. They had to understand what they were up against. As they continued to decrypt the transmissions, Carter began to piece together more of the puzzle. The Jara had been operating behind the scenes for centuries, manipulating galactic conflicts, orchestrating the rise and fall of entire species. They were a dark intelligence, a force with no regard for life, whose ultimate goal was the total domination and assimilation of any race they encountered. Their motives were clear. Humanity had reached a point of growth that threatened their plans, and the Valdari were merely the first wave of an invasion that would bring about humanity's extinction. The Valdari's role, as horrifying as it was, suddenly seemed smaller, almost insignificant in comparison to the looming threat of the Jara. But Carter knew one thing. This war couldn't end with just defeating the Valdari. If they didn't act quickly and decisively, the Jara would turn their attention to humanity and wipe them out, just as they had done to countless other species before them. The entire galaxy could fall to this monstrous intelligence, and there would be no one left to stop it. "We need to unite everyone," Carter said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Not just humans and Kithrians, all the factions. The Jara are too powerful for any one species to stand against them alone. We need to strike at the heart of their operation before they can complete their extermination of humanity, and we need to do it together." Foster nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "But sir, how do we even begin to fight something like that?" Carter looked out at the stars, the battlefield around him now seeming insignificant. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. We've already taken the first step by exposing the truth. Now we have to gather allies. We need every ship, every weapon, every resource we can find. The war has only just begun, and we're going to need all the help we can get." As the Odyssey limped through the wreckage of the battle, Carter realized that the war was no longer just about winning. It was about survival. The Jara had declared humanity's extermination, but Carter wasn't ready to give up. He would fight to the very end. The universe had thrown its worst at them, but now it was time for the humans to show the galaxy what they were made of. And maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide against an ancient enemy that had waited far too long to be stopped. The clock was ticking, and Carter would stop at nothing to ensure humanity had a future. The Odyssey was battered, its hull groaning with every maneuver, yet it continued to fight on, pushed forward by Captain Carter's unyielding will and the unwavering loyalty of his crew. With the Kithrians by their side, humanity's last hope seemed dim, but not impossible. The Valdari Armada, once a symbol of unstoppable power, now faced an alliance that would stop at nothing to protect their home. The final showdown had come. Carter knew the stakes couldn't be higher. Humanity's survival depended on this last push, and there was no room for failure. The battle lines were drawn in space. The Valdari fleet, still massive despite the losses, had regrouped and were prepared to make one last stand. Their flagship, a monstrous vessel that dwarfed everything else around it, was guarded by the fiercest and most skilled commanders the Valdari had. But Carter, with the combined might of the human fleet and the Kithrians, had a plan. They would strike fast, hit hard, and create chaos within the Valdari ranks. Carter knew their greatest advantage was their unpredictability, and that was something the Valdari didn't understand. The Odyssey was severely damaged, but its stealth and speed were unmatched, and Carter planned to use every advantage to take down the Valdari's strongest leaders. Under Carter's command, the fleet launched a series of devastating surprise attacks on the Valdari lines. Kithrian warships darted in and out, cloaking themselves in shadows to strike at vulnerable spots on the Valdari ships, while human vessels, though fewer in number, used clever maneuvers to outsmart the enemy. The battle was relentless. The sky filled with the bright flashes of explosions and the deep rumbles of weapons fire. Carter's crew, though exhausted, fought with a determination that only came from knowing they had no other choice. They were fighting for their future, for their homes, for the people they loved. But even as the Valdari fleet began to falter, their supreme commander, General Zorath, remained a towering figure in the heart of the battle. He had led the invasion from the start, his ruthless tactics and fearsome leadership ensuring that the Valdari had made significant inroads into human space. Carter knew this final battle wouldn't be won unless Zorath was taken down. The general was a strategic genius, and his influence over the fleet was absolute. If the commander could be defeated, the Valdari would crumble. The time had come for Carter to face Zorath. In a bold and dangerous move, he ordered the Odyssey to breach the heart of the Valdari formation and confront the general directly. His crew worked furiously to keep the ship functioning, knowing that they were about to enter the most perilous part of the war. The Odyssey cut through enemy lines, dodging fire, its weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Zorath's ship loomed ahead, surrounded by an army of Valdari ships, each one guarding their commander like a swarm of angry hornets. In a tense, action-packed standoff, Carter's tactical brilliance came into play. Using Kithrian technology, the Odyssey was able to temporarily disable the Valdari fleet's communications, throwing them into disarray. This gave Carter the window he needed. The Odyssey surged forward, directly into the heart of the Valdari flagship's defenses, and for the first time since the war began, it seemed as if victory was within their grasp. Carter, accompanied by a small team of his best officers, boarded Zorath's flagship. The final confrontation between the two leaders was as brutal as it was inevitable. Zorath, with his cold, calculating demeanor, was a formidable opponent. Each move he made was part of a larger strategy, each decision lethal. But Carter's relentless determination, fueled by the sacrifices made by his crew and the desperate desire to save humanity, gave him the edge. The battle on Zorath's ship was a blur of weapons fire, hand-to-hand combat, and the sounds of warships exploding in the distance. But Carter, as if driven by some higher power, finally reached Zorath, facing him one-on-one. The two exchanged blows, their strength and resolve pitted against each other in a battle for the future of the galaxy. With one final, calculated strike, Carter took down the Valdari commander, severing the head of their operation. The victory was hard won, but it came at an enormous cost. The Odyssey was nearly destroyed in the chaos of the battle, its engines failing and hull breaches spreading throughout the ship. Many of Carter's crew members had been lost, their sacrifices written into the history of the war. But the tide had finally turned. The Valdari, without their leader, began to scatter and retreat. The alliance of humans and Kithrians had won, and humanity's future had been secured, for now. As Carter stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, looking at the wreckage of the Valdari fleet around him, he allowed himself a rare moment of relief. The battle was over, and the galaxy was free from the Valdari's grasp. But Carter knew this was not the end. The true enemy, the Jara, still lurked in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The war had not truly ended. It had only just begun. But for now, humanity had survived, and Carter would ensure it would fight another day. The silence after the battle was deafening, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had consumed space just days before. Captain Elias Carter stood alone on the ruined bridge of the Odyssey, his eyes scanning the debris of the Valdari Armada scattered across the stars. The once proud ship, battered and broken, was a testament to the resilience of the crew that had fought on board it. The Odyssey was no more, but its legacy lived on in the hearts of those who had survived. The human race, once on the verge of extinction, had defied the odds, crushing an invincible enemy and saving the galaxy from certain annihilation. Carter, though weary and scarred, knew that the victory was only the beginning of something far larger than they could ever imagine. In the days following the final battle, humanity's role in the galaxy was forever changed. The news of the Odyssey's victory spread like wildfire, reaching the far corners of the galaxy. The human resistance had become a rallying cry for oppressed species everywhere, and soon, alliances formed that no one had thought possible. The Valdari may have been defeated, but the Jara, the true enemy, remained a looming shadow, waiting to strike. Yet, Carter's leadership and humanity's fight against the Valdari had ignited a spark of hope across the galaxy. Species that had once viewed humans as insignificant now recognized their potential. The Kithrians, who had fought beside humanity in the battle, were among the first to pledge their support in the coming war. They shared their advanced technology, their knowledge of galactic warfare, and their intelligence on the Jara's tactics. Together, they began to lay the groundwork for a new era, one where humanity would no longer be a small player in the vastness of space. Though Carter had been physically and emotionally scarred by the endless battles, he had become a symbol of human resilience and unyielding determination. His face was often seen on the holoscreens, broadcast across countless worlds, a reminder of what humanity had endured and overcome. To many, he was not just a captain, he was a living legend, a hero who had faced impossible odds and come out victorious. The crew that had once followed him into the heart of battle now stood beside him as allies, their unity stronger than ever before. Together, they had achieved the impossible, and together, they would face whatever came next. However, Carter did not allow himself to rest on his newfound fame. He knew the true test was still ahead of them. The Jara, the ancient and powerful, artificial intelligence that had manipulated the Valdari, were still a threat. Carter had seen the signs, distant signals, strange transmissions, and unexplained phenomena that indicated the Jara's influence was beginning to spread, even beyond the Valdari's defeat. Carter's mind raced, knowing that time was running out. Humanity had won a great battle, but the war was far from over. The Kithrians, ever loyal and now firm allies, offered their full support to humanity's cause. Their technology, once thought of as advanced and mysterious, now became humanity's lifeline in the fight against the Jara. They worked tirelessly to upgrade human ships, train soldiers, and share knowledge about the ancient AI that had threatened them all. Carter, despite the weight of leadership pressing heavily upon him, refused to let the knowledge of their next war overshadow the accomplishments they had achieved. He stood before his people, addressing them with the same conviction that had carried him through the toughest battles. "We have shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated," he said, "but we are not done. This victory is just the beginning. The Jara still watch from the shadows, And it is up to us to make sure they never control the stars again." As he spoke, Carter could see the faces of his crew, of the Kithrians, and of other allied species in the crowd. There was a shared understanding in their eyes, an understanding that the war for humanity's future was just beginning. They were ready. And Carter, the reluctant hero, was prepared to lead them once again into the unknown, armed with the knowledge that humanity had made its mark on the galaxy. The Odyssey may have been gone, but the fire that had burned within its crew was far from extinguished. It was a new era for humanity, a time of hope, unity, and strength, and the fight against the Jara would be a battle they would face together, no matter the cost. With determination burning in his chest, Carter vowed that he would lead humanity into a future where the stars would no longer be ruled by fear. And in the hearts of every soul that had stood with him, from the humans to the Kithrians and beyond, a new, unbreakable bond was formed, a bond that would carry them through the dark times ahead